that we can share on our website, so just to let you know. But can I welcome you all here today? Really appreciate you coming. My name's Paul Kelly, for those who haven't heard this before. I'm the Director of Breaking Ground. This is the new community-led housing hub launched on Saturday last week for the Liverpool City region, and I'm really thrilled to be helping to set up the hub. We've been doing a whole week of sessions. This is our 15th of 20 events that we're doing, just to kind of really promote the ideas of community-led housing across Liverpool. And part of our work is around actually raising the information about what community-led housing is all about across the region, and also then providing expert support to enable groups to develop their projects. Just so you know, if I haven't said already, we will be finishing at about 5:02 because of another meeting at 2 o'clock. But today is all about how, which is a really important session for us, about how local authorities can play the role of enabler to community-led housing projects in their region. And I'm really thrilled to have Elaine Olphert from Bristol City Council, I hope I pronounced that right, and Susan Cataldi, I think, is also here from Bristol Community Land Trust, who are the hub for Bristol, supporting projects in that area. And also Barry Kushner, the Cabinet Lead for Housing with Liverpool City Council, who is going to respond really to what has been said. But I'm going to hand over first to Elaine, who's the Head of Delivery at Bristol City Council, to talk about what I think is a really inspiring approach that they have taken in Bristol to embed community-led housing. So welcome, Elaine. Welcome to sunny Liverpool, and over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction. As Paul said, I head up the housing delivery team for Bristol City Council. The housing delivery team is a multifaceted team working across all of housing delivery in the city. We de-risk council-owned land for disposal to RPs, open market, community groups, and we have our own housing delivery company, Gorham Homes, as well as having an HRA delivery route too. We also, within the team, have the enabling function. So we work with RPs in the enabling function, but the community-led housing is firmly embedded in that enabling team. So what benefits would a council see for community-led housing, and why would an administration consider it? So Bristol have had community-led housing at the heart of what they do for some time now. So I'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of what Bristol have done, the model and the journey so far. So we believe there are substantial benefits to community-led housing. It enables local people to play a leading and lasting role in solving local housing problems, creating genuine affordable homes, and it builds resilience into those communities. It's designed by local communities, for local communities, and that makes it really, really valuable to us. Community-led housing also empowers local people to be more self-reliant, and it gives residents a stronger voice within the community they live in the city or the town. So is there a place for community-led housing within local authority housing delivery? Well, we think yes, we think absolutely, and we're very supportive of it. And it also aligns with our corporate strategy for fair and inclusive. It's a key commitment. So how did we get to where we got? So it's been a bit of a long journey. So 2016, there were a few community groups developing and looking to develop housing in the city. There were a few projects that had happened, there were a few projects that were in hand, but there was a real appetite to do more. There were about 30 or 30 plus groups at that point. We have about 46 now. So there was a visioning workshop, and it was held with officers, politicians, community groups, and there was a real aspiration to find out what the city could do and what the ask was. So out of that visioning workshop, there were a variety of asks. One of them was to acknowledge that community-led housing was a valid route for delivery, was valuable to the city, and it also could deliver homes. It wasn't just an aspiration or a pie in the sky idea. There was a requirement for a land disposal policy to support community-led housing. Land also to be made available, so not just the policy, but actually what can you do to deliver, to support setting up a hub to help move land forward with those groups and de-risk it, and an officer to work with groups and the hub so that those aspirations could be realised, and funding to be made available, of course. So that's time, resources, land and money. Those are fairly big asks. And we could have said, no, it's too hard. No, it's too much. No, it's too time consuming. No, we're a bit scared. We don't know what to do. But what we didn't. We listened. Bristol listened. And we worked with Homes England to secure funding for a community-led housing officer and to fund pre-development work associated with the first round of land disposals, or it was a bidding round, to community groups and self-builders as well. We reviewed our land holdings in the city and assessed the surplus. Was land appropriate to be considered for community land release? And in 2018, we appointed that dedicated community-led housing manager that was so much needed. It took a while to get moving, but we didn't stop there, and the momentum has grown since then. On the 4th of February this year, Cabinet, well actually it was 2020, not this year, it was a year ago, Cabinet approved the community-led housing land disposal policy. The policy releases land specifically for community groups, and importantly, it incorporates the ability to recognise social value. So that allows community groups to acquire the land at either affordable levels or at nil rate, to enable that affordable housing to come forward. We listened to the community groups to ensure that the land disposal policy included all the types of groups that were interested in bidding, and as a result, the policy wording was changed at the end of last year, just as the first tranche of bids was coming to an end, so that we could ensure that anybody that had bid was able to get the benefit. So the first phase was 11 sites, and they ranged in size from about 3 to 10 units, and we received really strong bids from a range of community organisations seeking to deliver innovative and affordable housing models. We've now made announcements to the preferred bidders, and the team is working to support those groups and move those sites forward. To help with funding, we've also extended Bristol City Council's affordable housing grant eligibility to include other organisations such as community land trusts, community-led housing organisations, and also specialist housing providers, on the proviso that they are non-profit making organisations. And off the back of that change to the affordable housing grant eligibility, we've had our first grant application from a local community group looking to do affordable community housing, which is fantastic. And it's only for 2 units, but it's a start. Also on the 4th of February, our self-build land disposal policy went through as well. The policy, again, releases land to people who want to build in their local community, their main residence. Yes, it's different from community-led housing, as the sites are disposed of at market value, but it demonstrates that Bristol is doing what it can to support all housing within communities and really empower people. So I'll go back to now the community-led bidding process. How were the sites, or how were the bids assessed when they came in? The bidders' applications were reviewed by officers initially, and the panel was made up of 3 members of housing delivery team and a finance officer. So that was a really good spread of people, and they were assessed against 5 criteria: housing proposal, deliverability, community benefits, social value, and the financial offer. Some bidders fell away through the process because they didn't meet one or other of the criteria. Of the 11 sites, 6 sites got really strong bids, and they were valued prior to planning being in place at about £750,000. We could have decided at that point maybe we could get some capital receipts. Again, we didn't. under the Levelling Up agenda, we really want to empower our local communities. So we decided to continue. Let's continue and let's see how far we get. And it's about looking beyond the pounds and instead, what is the effect and the collective benefit to the community, and demonstrating those social, economic and environmental benefits across the whole city and within communities themselves. So our social value model is based on the national TOMS model, and the outcomes are mapped against our corporate strategy and our mayoral commitments. So we have targets that have been set, there are outcomes that are measurable, and they can also be monitored and reported through the process as the sites actually deliver units. But it's also worth mentioning that everything we do in Bristol has a minimum of 20% social value weighting. So that's everything from service delivery, supply chain, procurement, grant awards, investments, land disposals, absolutely everything. So we were looking for those groups to demonstrate those economic, social or environmental outcomes, and it was taken very seriously. When we look at the money, so the bids for the site, most were £1 and 2 were £500. So that is a big difference from the sort of the valuation we have as to the bids that came in. So also to help move things forward, we supported the setup of the West of England Housing Hub, so that the hub's well established now and it has power to change funding for the next few years. The hub recently secured funding for community groups across the city to enable pre-planning work on a number of those sites. And we've also provided the Wordsworth Centre in Lochleys to enable a centre for learning, and the first snug home prototype to be built. And I think it's, as far as I know, it's complete, and they're opening it this week and residents are moving in. So as you can see, we really do have community-led housing firmly embedded within the city and the housing enabling function and the housing enabling team. We work also across internal teams, property to release the land, planning and highways too, and we actively help groups negotiate the whole process. That's where we've got to. We have we've some really exciting projects coming forward. We're working with the VCLT on a site called Sheldon Road, which is 50 affordable rent and shared ownership, and this was pre-land disposal. Glencoyne Square is our biggest community-led housing development. It's 120 new homes. It's got a community provision, a library, a health centre, and it'll really start a whole regeneration of that area once it starts in earnest. And on a completely different scale to Glencoyne Square is what we call We Can Make. It's a pilot project of 16 microplots in the rear gardens of Bristol City Council owned housing stock. And the project will deliver real additional affordable housing. So we're working with that group at the moment. They've got 2 in planning, they've just been approved, and they're working on the other 14 units. So what have we done? I think you'll agree in saying we've been brave, we've taken risks, we've released land to community groups, we've made funding available, and we've really taken community-led housing seriously, and we will continue to do so. There's a really good buzz around it. There are lessons to be learnt. We recognise that bidding for subsidy can be really, really daunting for groups, so we're setting up a how-to guide for community groups so they can negotiate and navigate the routes to funding. We're reviewing our grant funding policy to make sure that it's as easy as it possibly can be for those groups to get funding. We're going to do some more de-risking of the next tranche of sites, which we're working on at the minute, to make it easier to negotiate planning. And any sites that didn't get released or that didn't get bids in the first tranche, we're looking to re-release them with a bit more de-risking done. And we've been canvassing them as well and working with the hub to canvass them to other community groups. So what have we really learned? It's hard, it's a challenge. And getting officers aligned can be a challenge as well, even if there's clear political support, because you've got to change the way you think. And everybody has to be behind it, and everybody has to understand the value of it. And that in itself is a hurdle that you may have to get over, but it's well worth persevering and getting someone to champion it, and pull all your colleagues along with you as well. The hub have been great. We could have probably lent on the hub more to engage with community groups and let them know the programme for things, because as we were learning, things were taking longer than we had envisaged, and that can be difficult for people on the outside because we know but they don't know. So I think we could have communicated better. What will be really interesting is in a couple of years, when things are coming out of the ground, to go back and look at it and see the progress and measure it and see how, you know, is there anything more we could do to move it forward and make it as more exciting and better. So that's where we are as an authority, and those are the things we've done and the challenges that we've overcome. And I really hope that gives you an indication of it can be done and it's worth doing. And there are challenges, but it's not insurmountable. So that's the Bristol journey for you. Paul, back to you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. I mean, I'm bound to say this, aren't I, given that I'm setting up the hub, but, you know, in some ways it's very, very simple, but then in others it's hugely radical, and it's just very, very exciting to hear this. And you know, that's what's been great, working with Susan at the Bristol Community Land Trust hub there and the other hubs, just seeing what is possible and learning. But I'd like now to hand over to Councillor Barry Kushner, Cabinet Lead for Housing in Liverpool, who will talk through his thoughts and where Liverpool's at, and then we'll open up a discussion if you want to put some questions in the chat. Over to you, Barry.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Elaine. That was really interesting. I mean, Bristol is ahead of where we are in Liverpool, and I think we've got some things to learn from that. So, and actually, I think we'll go, and hopefully we're going to meet and find out a little bit more about, you know, to what we can learn from the way Bristol are approaching it. Because in principle, I think we would do pretty much something similar to that. I mean, Liverpool's got a great history of housing, and I mean, I've mentioned this before, but I think that the analogy of where we are now in our history is closer to coming out of the pandemic, is closer to the cholera epidemics in the 19th century. And it's interesting, you know, and I was at a meeting yesterday talking about the Healthy Homes Act, which I'll make a plug for later on, that the same issues are being raised now in relation to the spread of the pandemic that were raised during the cholera epidemic back in the 19th century, although housing has obviously improved since then, but overcrowding is still an issue. Poor housing is still an issue. Poor insulation and damp housing and poor quality housing, you know, remains an issue. And I feel and believe that our response that coming out of the pandemic has to be as transformational as our predecessors did coming out of the cholera epidemic, and it led to the Housing Act in 1919, and obviously, you know, sanitation and networks of clean water and things like that in the middle of the 19th century. And so I think that's a key thing for me, and it's quite of a unique place that housing plays in that. I mean, in Liverpool we have had some interesting community-led, wasn't called that at the time, but community-led initiatives in Liverpool. Your Habitat for Community were active here about 20 years ago probably, and those houses still standing, look great. The Eldonians, probably one of the bigger cooperative housing developments way back 30 odd years ago. We tried with an initiative of Homes for £1 in Liverpool more recently here, which I think if we'd done it through a community-led approach, we would have done that probably much better than we have done. So we've been feeling around for it, because Liverpool's housing is old. It's a bit different to Bristol, I think. So if you look nationally, 35% of housing nationally was built pre-1944. Well, 35% of Liverpool's housing was built pre-1919. 63% of it was built in pre-1944. So we have housing that, of which we've got 13% of our houses, 29,000 of them, that are hazardous. We've got 17% of people living in fuel poverty in the city because of the poor installation and because of the construction of our houses. And we've got huge waiting lists, and we've got huge demand for 1 and 2 bed properties, some less but still demand for 4 bed properties, and the huge demand for for elderly care, particularly to stay within communities where they're currently living. So there's some of the challenges that that we have as a city. In terms of where we are, we're about to publish our house. It's a housing mix. Council housing is, because we're able to start doing that again. So we will. That's a sort of a cornerstone and anchor for what we're going to do. And as well as opportunities for, if we're working with RPs, but also houses for sale and helping people get on the property ladder, through rent to buy and shared ownership and and things like that. But community led is a key element of it, and a key element of the way that want to develop in Liverpool is a neighbourhood based approach to housing development, in all of those different areas. We have the combined authority has commissioned a land commission that we're waiting for, and I think that will help in terms of how we sort of work up with community led with a little bit of volume. So we have been working with some groups, and they're starting to approach us, large as well, through the work that Paul's doing through the community hub, because they're interested in how they can move forward. But I think it's useful for us to be able to do something on a combined authority level, because it just helps in terms of some of the volume, particularly I think in how we work with Homes England and how we get some of the money from Homes England into some of those community-led developments. And in a way that kind of highlights what I think I agree with Elaine, and probably what people on this call will say they want from councils, and that is to facilitate land from us, because we're access or and I think that's what we're going to start to do. I think we need to and I think we will work closely with the Housing Hub to identify those groups across the city that are interested in community-led housing, to start identifying and matching that against bits of the land that might be available on those sort of smaller sites across the city, which will then sort of we can wrap up and do, and then and dispose of in a similar way that Bristol has done. So I think that I mean our commitment to that as a local authority, I think is really clear, and I think we are keen to help to develop that sector, which I think it needs some work on. Somebody posted there that there's 30 co-ops in Liverpool, but we in this new generation of community-led housing, I think we want to work closely with the Housing Hub, and I think across the combined authority, to support where we can for communities to get involved in this. And I think, I mean, I generally, these developments are in areas of in some of the poorer areas of the city, and I think that the impact of, and what I'd like to see, and I think what the impact of this has, however small these developments are, that the message that it sends in terms of offering people from local communities some control and influence over the housing within their own area, I think has a much broader impact. And I'm really keen to support that and develop that, because that should feed into all the other developments that we're doing in the city. So I think as far as where we are now, to round up, I suppose in terms of where we are now, we are at a much earlier stage than Bristol. I think while some of the groups start to find their feet in Liverpool and we need to be in parallel, start to get our policy right, our land designation right, and start to prepare to make that land available for groups that can use that land for community-led housing. But in terms of from my point of view and from the city, I think that we're full square behind that. And I would also say, in some respects, that could extend to retail. We have shops as well, and we could do community-led shops, so it doesn't have to stop at houses. And I'm sort of quite keen to do that. And I think probably, if I'm honest, in the city we've missed a couple of opportunities of doing that, but we still have some sort of retail spaces that we can do to help to develop that. And I think that's a key part of the of kind of regeneration and that community development alongside retail and housing that I'm keen to promote as well. So I'm absolutely full square behind this, and open to how we move along and develop it with our partners in the city, and really excited to get some of the proposals and some of the groups that we're already started talking to who are interested in developing this. And we will learn from the likes of Bristol and others that have been able to manage this and do this successfully.
Cheers, Barry. Thanks very much. And I think we might be behind, but what I think I found, certainly since starting this role, is that there's a real appetite, there's a real political appetite to support this. I think I've got a bit of a wobbly internet, so sorry if I'm slurring. Right, we've got about 25 minutes, so who wants to ask any questions or comments? Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, it's amazing. It is also amazing. Like, I'm just agreeing with what you just said then, Paul. Like, to hear that, like, the councillors and the people who do actually have like the power to kind of like take and make things happen, like turn it into action. But forgive me if I'm ignorant in this, because we're only quite new at Liverpool Boats community. What's the best sort of avenue to get in touch with you? Is it just to kind of like email people such as yourself, Barry, who have showed an interest in sort of like let you know we're out there and we're just as a community-led housing?
Well, you can always email me directly. I'll put my email up on the chat in a minute. But I think what we're really keen to do is work through the hub to sort of bring groups like yours together. And when it comes to the land disposal, it's we'll need to do that with a number of lands and a number of plots together. But definitely interested to know more, to know what kind of what developments there are people are interested in doing. But I would, and we'll work closely with Paul. So I'll give you my email address. Happy for you to email me, but I would contact Paul, and we'll work closely with Paul in support of the groups that come through.
Yeah, we are working with the Boaters Co-op. We're just helping them get incorporated at the moment, and then the next stage is, they want to look for moorings to set up as a cooperative moorings, because some people like to live on water, and we have quite a bit of it here that could be a real feature of what we do. So it's been exciting working with that group, actually, and we're going to make that happen this year, move that on. Any other thoughts, any other questions for Elaine or Susan or anybody?
Can I just come in a second and say that I think it's a really good idea for groups to liaise with the hub and have that, because what we found initially was everybody was talking to everybody, and there was a lot of that going on, and people it meant that there was no clear collective, there was no clear voice, and it meant that portfolio holders were being hit from all directions, and that can be really difficult, because sometimes when you just need to do a clear piece of work, if you're getting noise from all over the place, it slows things down. And that's what we found when we had our bid rounds going through. Community groups weren't necessarily going to the hub. They were coming to the mayor, they were coming to me, they were coming to the enabling team, and it just meant that everybody was all over the place. So my advice to you as a team is to work together as a team and push everything through the hub if you can, because then your hub is your point of contact, your hub is your support, and your hub is those are the people that should know what is going on. And if they're included and involved, I think it can make life easier and more straightforward generally. So that would be my advice in terms of communication. Communication is absolutely key to all of this, but try not to have all of this noise going on for everybody, because it will just slow everything down.
I think that's a great point, Elaine, and I think because sometimes, I mean, I've been involved with Homebaked Community Land Trust in Anfield since the beginning, really. And, you know, Homebaked's had great support from the local authority, absolutely. But sometimes that's to the exclusion of other community projects. And what we're trying to create is an atmosphere where all projects can move forward and we can grow them. So I think your point is really well made. Phil.
Sorry, just to underline that, I think our role is we need to get the land sorted. We need to get those things sorted and try and open up opportunities to access funding. I think that's our job, and that's an effort. I mean, as Elaine can probably attest to, that's an effort trying to get that to when, you know, planners and people who are responsible for premises and asset management are used to, they just want to get as much money as they can get out of the land and property as they can. So I think it's so I think that's our job, and we need to focus on that. But we will, you know, but we can work, you know, as Elaine said, through the hub, we can do all that one-to-one development work with you.
Phil, were you going to come in?
Yeah, sorry, I think you might have covered this, but I was going to say it's okay, our members coming to you, but then we've got to know you've got someone to go to at the relevant local authorities, but it sounds like you've got that covered.
Okay. Catherine, were you going to ask a question?
Well, it sort of links to what Phil just said, what Elaine was saying before. There's been comments in the chat. Is that whole thing of having a designated officer and champion within the authority around that, so that there is one port of call, but there's also somebody that's starting to, I guess, challenge the culture or perception within officers. And I'm not suggesting they're not supportive of community-led, but it's about saying that this is something that there's a real drive and commitment for from the city.
Wow, sorry, I got distracted because I just saw Katie said they registered yesterday, which is fantastic. That's really brilliant.
Yeah.
That's a good start to the weekend.
Yeah. The answer to that is that, you know, in council language, that is developing a policy, taking it through cabinet, and then making it clear and that underpinned with a clear set of guidance and principles about what that means in terms of designating land. So, and I think that's probably what I think Bristol has done. Elaine can talk better because they're doing it, but it's just clear that this is how we're dealing with these bits of land. We'll deal with those other bits of land in a different way, but this is what we're doing with these bits of land, and this is why. And actually, Bristol's social value policy is really good, and kind of, you know, something again that we're discussing within our own authority, and that's really important as well.
Sarah, can I bring you in? And then Arthur, although I know it's not Arthur.
Hiya, Paul. It's just a question really for both local authorities. How can we get this information out to other local authorities? It's some really great stuff that you're doing. And I just feel, I'm the community-led housing hub manager for North Yorkshire and East Riding. And there is literally zero appetite for the local authorities. And as much as we can shout from the rooftops, we are really facing big barriers. Now, is this a political animal, or what can we do? What you're doing, by the way, is just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I just feel so energized by that. So over to you guys. How can you get the great work that you're doing? How can you get it out there, in the environment of local authorities? Does it need government policy, or what is the animal? What can we do?
I'll come in on that one, I suppose. Community-led housing it's a challenge because it is a cultural shift. When we talk about housing delivery, we think about numbers. Housing delivery. Let's find a big site. Let's deliver lots and lots of houses in a really quick way, in a normal way, the normal way, with a developer or a development company. Community-led is different, and it does take buy-in. It really does. And so if there's political will, then it will filter through. Or if you've got an officer in the council who understands it, I think understanding it's a really big point as well. If they understand it, then they can speak to their portfolio holder and try and get it on the agenda. How you get it out across the whole country, I don't know. I've spoken to Oxford, they're really interested in it. There are local authorities that are interested in it. Maybe Barry could give you the heads up on how to sort of get the political backing.
Brilliant, thank you, Elaine.
It's partly down to personalities as well, in a way, because it's personal interest, isn't it?
Yeah.
In some respects, you know. I mean, I think it's and I think it's important to either have a senior officer, as Elaine has said, or somebody, you know, from politically who are committed to try and take this forward. And I think it's and that's really what you need.
We need a champion.
Need a champion, exactly. So I don't know whether there's a combined authority around North Yorkshire or not. I don't know.
We're actually going through a period of reorganisation, so we could become in a combined authority, but then we're going for devolution in Yorkshire, in North Yorkshire anyway. So it's a bit of a mess at the moment politically anyway, in terms of local authority. But I think if we can find a champion and really just put them on a pedestal, really, I think that would break some barriers. But it's just great stuff what you guys are both doing.
Did you want to come in on that? I've got Arthur, although I know it's not Arthur, and then Britt, and then Sophie. But do you want to come in, Susan, on that point particularly?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, we had lots of backing from Bristol, and we had a councillor, Paul Smith, for housing, who was a huge supporter of community-led housing, huge, did lots and really supported and advocated for community groups. And I would say it's also people power. You know, we had people, when we did the first kind of what is community-led housing, there were queues down the road. I mean, queues of people wanting to know that they could do something different. So I think it's a little bit of support and it's a little bit of people power. And I think that makes a world of difference.
Brilliant. Can I bring in Arthur?
Hi, it's Maisie. Sorry for coming in late. Arthur was sitting in for a bit and making notes, but I just the West of England Housing Hub, this is for Elaine really. So we're in Stroud, and I'm just wondering whether we would kind of approach the West of England Housing Hub in terms of like getting some support, setting up our CLT. We're kind of in the process of setting up the CLT, and we want to be working with a housing cooperative model sitting inside a CLT. And we're just wondering whether we could ask support from West of England Housing Hub and how to kind of approach our local authority and local councillors to kind of get them on board. Obviously, the neighbourhood development plan is super in line with what we're trying to do in terms of getting affordable housing here in Stroud, which just doesn't exist. So would we be able to kind of be under the West of England housing umbrella, or do we have to go to Gloss Hub? I know there's this other there is Gloss Hub. Yeah, sorry, Susan.
Yes, sorry. Do you want me to answer that? I'd just say we cover. We don't, unfortunately. You come under the Gloucester Hub. We cover Bristol, Bath, North East Somerset, South Gloss, and North Somerset. However, if you need anything, just a bit of advice, and then I can put you in touch. So I'll put my email address, and then maybe I can give you some help and some pointers anywhere, some signposting.
Great, thank you so much.
That's all right. No worries.
Are you putting the email address in the chat?
Sure,
Great.
will do.
Can I bring in Britt for a question, and then Sophie?
I'm sorry if I'm like blowing this kind of mould. So really, really exciting what you're doing, Elaine, and really great to hear from you, Barry, that this is coming in Liverpool as well. I guess I was on the Land Commission of the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority Independent Land Commission, and I think what we also spoke about, and I'm just interested if you start to think about that in Bristol, for example, or you have examples of that. We of course also talked about assets and land that are held in speculation, for example, or definitely not in social benefit by people who don't use them. So on our high streets, many properties have not been in use for a long time. And I guess the sort of next step in our thinking around land disposal is also, how do we get this land back for community use? And I just wondered, is that something you start thinking about? I know Scotland does a lot, and I think it's starting with us, but I'm just interested to hear.
I think my response to that it sort of initially would be to start where it's easiest. I mean, I think, which is land that we've got and perhaps some of our partners have got. I mean, I think where there is land banking, you know, where we may have opportunities is through compulsory purchase, but it's a lengthy process. It's not cheap, but there's some things that we can do. But I think that I mean, while we've got land, small bits of land that can help get this moving, I would rather, you know, we haven't got loads of capacity. You know, it's to focus our energies on what we can do. And I think there is, land banking is forever been a problem, and how we deal with that is difficult. You can make life a little bit more difficult, you know, in terms of strategic regeneration frameworks. And, you know, we're bringing in an Article 4 direction to stop the abuse of our communities through HMOs, and maybe some of those will become available as properties that could use, but could be thrown into the mix. But it's kind of, I think, I take your point, but I think at the moment where we are, just starting what's probably a bit is the easiest. And it's, yeah, I don't know what you think, Elaine.
Yeah, I was gonna reiterate that and say that I think, you know, choose your battles. And if you've got a local authority that will work with you and dispose of land to you as community groups, then that's got to be your first port of call, really. And I think that then once you've delivered and you've demonstrated that you can deliver, that starts to grow and it starts to gain momentum. And at some point, yes, you know, where developers have sat on things, or landlords have let buildings you know, and not move them forward, then yes, there's probably conversations to be had. But I think your first port of call has got to be your local authority if they are supportive. Yeah.
Okay. Just going to pick up something Stephen Hill said in the chat about, actually sometimes the perception is community-led housing is just really, really difficult, but actually all housing is really, really difficult in this country. So I think that's a really important point I just want to agree with and highlight. But can I bring in Sophie now with a question or comment?
Just a quick comment and a lesson from the Liverpool housing co-ops, which were way back in the last century, but they also broke new ground in the same way as CLTs are. I think key lesson is use every opportunity for good PR. Remember that there's nothing that politicians at any level, there's nothing they like better than being photographed outside or in front of good news stories, and that needs to happen both locally and at a national level. And also in 3 years' time there will be a general election, so and I don't know how all this works at a national level, but I think it's not too soon to be trying to get the message across into the manifestos for the 2024 election. So just a quick comment.
Okay.
I think one of the areas which we haven't really spoken about, but I think one of the areas I think that is challenging and needs a solution is access to the affordable homes grant, and how, you know, community-led, you know, groups have the opportunity of doing that, because at the moment you can only really get hold of it if you're a registered provider or you go through a registered provider. I mean, that's something that that government can do something about, but that's probably one of the difficult issues that community-led housing groups have got to get over.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Oh, sorry, there was a hand up there. Dave.
Yeah, sorry, Paul, can I come in?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Dave Little and your housing group. So from our perspective, we're an RP helping and support Homebake to deliver their vision. And, you know, our aspiration is that for them to be registered as soon as possible with Homes England and to deliver and grow as a CLT. So it sort of links very much into Barry's comment there, that actually we started the discussion with Homebake not knowing that they would need an RP partner. And we are doing it as efficiently as we can to support the community-led housing movement, and obviously working with Paul in the hub to do that. But taking on Sophie's comments as well and linking that up, I think there is a national discussion. I think the hubs have got a role to try and direct strategy. But for the North, I think it's difficult, because the Northern issue isn't necessarily about affordability, which is the Southern issue, and it's about maintaining that affordable housing, although certainly some parts of the Northwest are unaffordable to people. And certainly, certainly sort of moving into Greater Manchester, there's issues about affordability and people not being able to get on the housing ladder. So I think it's to sort of summarise, there's two aspects of this. It's communities regaining their neighbourhoods to develop a more community-focused approach, and housing being a key to that, and to build those neighbourhoods back. And we've already talked previously, Barry mentioned the ageing stock that we've got in Liverpool, and that's a real concern of me, in particular in North Liverpool, where there is a high density of private landlords, and actually an input of community ownership would only make those neighbourhoods better and more desirable for people to live in. And I think I put that out for a sort of comment. I'm not expecting Barry to come back to that, but I think it's a difficult issue, but one that would be really worthwhile. And the second is, from a local authority point of view, is setting targets where areas are unaffordable for people, to have an element of community-led housing on those new developments, and putting developers to account for that, so that we can drive the movement up, and to link in with the political parties and to try and mainstream community-led housing as it can be a real solution in a number of ways.
Can I just bring in Joe before we answer that question, who's also got a question?
Thanks. So I've been an elected councillor for nearly 3 years. I'm up for election again soon. And you know, one of the things that politicians that are leading local authorities are most interested in is votes, and what are the key issues that people are engaged with, what the petitions around, what is landing on the front page of the local newspaper, that kind of thing. And my experience with working with council officers is they generally do as they're asked. They follow the political lead of the administration, whoever that might be. So in terms of, like one officer to work with, I think is probably a holy grail. It's going to be a team approach, but it is down to the political leadership, and that in turn is down to what are people organising around, what are the issues that are coming up, you know, and housing is a major issue. It's the right to buy has decimated the council housing stock, and the affordability and availability of social housing is quite different than it was 20 years ago. It's a major issue, but people aren't necessarily organising around that, and that's one of the things that can change the political priorities and the financial resources available and the availability of land and so on. And sometimes it's noise is what's needed, depending on which stage of the sort of process we're at. If it's at an early stage, there probably needs to be a lot of noise made so that it becomes a political priority and an election issue. And when it's at the stage of implementation, you are talking more of the detail of jumping through various hoops and that kind of thing. One other thing in my experience is that the successful community-led housing initiatives, the ones that have started 20, 30 years ago, the ones that are starting now, they come out of struggle. They come out of social justice issues, about groups of people organising together to defend what they've got, to challenge power and to create affordable housing that their community needs. And it's that struggle against injustice that's the key, I think, for driving this issue forward.
Thanks, Joe, very much. We've got 2 minutes left just before I bring in Barry. I think that a point about affordability, Dave, I know that's been discussed at the hub, and actually it's about housing being linked to people's pay, what they're getting and what they're living on, and rather than actually what's kind of nationally kind of suggested around affordability, because people are paying 80-90% of their salaries on keeping a roof over their heads. I think that's a big thing for the hub. But I don't know if either Barry or Elaine wanted to come in with a last comment on what Dave or Joe has said.
Well, just I'll quickly, and Elaine can come in as well. I don't like the concept of affordable is the same as one. Between affordable and social is the same distinction between what's fair and what's equal. So I think let's be clear about what rent we're talking about. If we're talking about near market rent, we should be saying that. If we're talking about social rent, I think we should be saying that. I think the other element of this, just the final thing I would say in terms of social justice, is the design and the quality of the housing has got to be right. And it's got to be good and modern and long-standing and lifetime home and thermally comfortable and adaptable. And I think that's very important. We have got design principles that we would like to see adopted, but I think the quality has got to be there as well.
Okay, Elaine, can I ask you to say maybe a last word?
Yeah, I think fair and inclusive and mixed and balanced communities, that's really what we want, isn't it? We want that social justice. We want everyone to have a home, and regardless of whether it's 1 or 2 homes being built, or 30 or 40,000, every home that is built is a really valuable one, and it gives someone a home. And I think that's really important. So, as in housing delivery, it doesn't matter how many we're delivering, as long as we're delivering everyone in the same way, with that fair and inclusive and mixed and balanced communities in mind, I think.
Okay. Can I thank you all very much? I really want to thank Elaine and Susan. The connections we've made with Bristol is great and are just starting, and it is inspiring what you're doing there. I think you felt that. And also Barry, I know he's really passionate about this and behind this, and we'll be working with you to help you implement it. I really value everyone's time today. We will share the recording. Enjoy the sunshine, because it's glorious here, and I'm sure it is where you are, and have a great afternoon. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Paul.